So, just a quick heads up, I am finishing up the little, hey, I'm going live to everybody on Facebook and some other places. So, some of these addresses will go out after I've already done the video, but I wanted to go ahead and share one more place. So bear with me and we'll get started. And remember, if you are interested in being part of the conversation, make sure you head over to Patreon. I won't be able to see the camera, so I won't be addressing anything that's in the conversation here if you're seeing this on YouTube for whatever reason. So be advised. Comments are a better way to hear from me. I'm going to go over a few things before I get started with the actual spinning because I wanted to share some things that are related. And that's pretty much it. So, one more share. Okay, so a few things. I'm going to be spinning today. This is yarn. This is my first official hand spun. And this is a 70% merino, 30% silk blend that I got from Humblebee Knits. If you head over to Patreon, I'll have all the show notes, so just be advised that none of this information is going to be under the YouTube video, but on Patreon I'll have a little more to talk about there, links to all the things and people that I talk about, as well as an easier way to do comments and conversations with me. So make sure you head up Patreon, and that'll be the easiest way for me to get back in touch with you. So, this is a thick and thin. It is hand spun, and I used, oh gracious, this spalted maple with it. This is a Russian compromise spindle, and the compromise, as the maker says, is the hook, because a lot of these actually come to a point. So this is a slightly non-traditional version of this tool, but it's a lot easier with the hook to spin it, so I'm okay with that. And then I used this Etruscan ring distaff, which is actually like a Greek-ish tool, and it was my first time using them together and actually using either of them at all, and they match. Look at that. That was an accident. I did not buy these at the same time, and so that was really cool. And if you want to hear more about the makers of these tools and the fiber that was dyed up, then make sure you head over to my Patreon. And I see that I don't want this here, so we'll move that. And we'll actually move this over here. So I think we can get started now. Catch up. So, first off, this is what's left. This hasn't been drafted. I haven't separated this all the way. As you can see, it's a really big, thick swath, and I could spin this right as it is, but I wanted a thinner spin, so I broke this apart, and that's what I haven't gotten to yet. I'll be using my spinning spoon. This is made out of cherry. And it says in Tolkien's runes, not all who wander are lost, because I love Lord of the Rings and I'm a huge dork, so this is really cool. I got this from the Dancing Goats on Etsy. Again, that information is in the show notes on my Patreon. So, and these are live. All of these videos are free to watch for everybody. Most of my videos are behind a paywall. You know, you're a patron, and so you get access to things that other people don't. But because I'm not actually doing a demo and I'm not actually teaching, I'm just kind of working on something, and I'm letting you be a weird voyeur about it, which is totally fine with me. Here we go. So this is a spinning spoon, and the bowl part of it functions as a bowl, much like this is a spinning bowl, for a supported spindle to sit in. And this is another Russian. This is made out of hedge apple. You can see the cop that's already here. That's some of the fiber that I wound up yesterday. This is about 37 minutes worth of work. So that's not a whole lot. By the time I was done with the first one, I think the cop was out to here in some places, and it was the full length from about here all the way up to there. So it was a lot. And so because this is a bit of a shorter in the shaft area, this is going to be probably a fatter cop when it's all said and done. But to use a supported spindle, you have to have a bowl or a spoon or something. And this is like apparently some old school weird spinning tool that not a lot of people know about. And I gotta tell you, it's freaking fabulous. I love it. So you set it under your leg. That's why this is all flat. And you can sit it between your legs or you can sit it off to the side. I go between because this is just frankly how I sit. So there's that. And then this to the side, make sure it doesn't roll. And I'll be using my wrist or elbow distaff. I want to say this is probably persimmon. It's ink stain. I know that. And I don't know for sure. This was actually a gift. This is also from the Dancing Goats. Robin makes just kick-ass tools that I can't go on enough about. And it's got a little Who bird. Look at that guy. Ha! I love owls. So you just loop this around your wrist or your elbow, and the fluff hangs out on here that's not being spun, so it's out of the way, but you can also hold it without it being on your hand. And you can absolutely hold it on your hand. It doesn't really matter. This is just a fun little tool. And the difference between this and this is that this is hung here, right? And then this is how this is held. So this is, it takes a little bit of getting used to. I was fooling around with holding it this way because your pointer and your index finger are what you're going to be using for the fiber. And so as long as those two fingers are free or can be free and you not drop it, then it's fine. But it's taking me a little getting used to, so I'm going to have to practice more with this. But this is also one of those somewhat odd, obscure tools that, you know, if you're not a serious spinner, you probably never even heard of. I saw it and I knew I had to have one because that's pretty much how I feel about all of Robin's stuff. So, woo, let's get spinning now. Okay, I don't know how long this video is going to be. One moment, let's see if I can not hit my camera. Because I think my thing is about to die, and I didn't think about that, and shame on me. I don't want it to die. Thing is plugged in. No, that's not the word either. Woo! We're having some weird technical difficulties. My bad. Okay. So let's see how that works. If you hear me yelp, that's because my tablet fell. And we don't want it to fall, but you know, it can happen. Gracious. And I'm trying not to hit everything. It's a little cluttered around here, by the way. If you haven't noticed, a lot of stuff going on. Desk. And maybe should have prepared a little better. Technical difficulties, pardon me. Oh my gosh. No, that's not gonna work either. Okay. Oh, there we go. So that's just gonna have to work right there. As it is. All right. Let's see. Make sure that my desk or my chair doesn't hit this and knock it over. And that there. So before you get started doing this, you're going to want to make sure that you have separated out all of your fiber, at least the fiber that you're going to work with. And you'll see as I'm spinning, why this takes the time it takes. So this has been already torn off of that big hunk, and I need to draft it out more because if I were to spin this, as thick as this is probably how big the yarn would be, somewhere right in there, which is not what I want. And drafting is just you pulling on the fibers, and there's a bit of an art to it. If you draft too far, then what happens is the fibers just pull apart entirely. And you'll see that they start to thin. Because this has silk in it, the silk is a pretty long staple fiber. And so you can pull it a good ways. And I don't want to pull it too much because I don't want any thread, like actual thread thin. I'm probably going to have some points in this spin that are a little thinner and are a little thicker, which is why it's called a thick and thin. And that's fine. All right, so this right here is a little thicker, which means I might end up drafting some of this a little more as I'm spinning, which is something I do, but I'm doing most of the drafting here now. Notice I'm tugging on this very gently. I don't want to tug on it too much. And I don't want to tug here and then move over just there and tug. I want to space it out a little more than that, because I don't want really thick and really thin pieces. And as you, this is probably hard for you to see, but in person you can see where the fibers are starting to move. And so if you pay attention, you can kind of get a sense for when you're pulling too much or too little, or when you have more you could pull. And I've got this piece right here that I'm going to go ahead and separate. And this will happen. You'll have like really small pieces come off, and that's fine. And I could have left that there, but that would have required a lot more drafting when I got to that point. Okay, so now that I've drafted that, it is time to wind it around the distaff. Now what I've learned is I'm going to want it to pull a certain way. So when I'm holding it and it's coming off this way, I like it to come off of here. So I will hold this bit of fiber down here, and I will very loosely wrap it around here. And I say loosely because I'm not going to be guiding the fiber off of the distaff, really. And so I don't want it to have a lot of resistance when it comes off, because that will cause it to continue to basically draft. And then it will just pull apart. And it may end up doing that anyway, but that's why I'm going for a looser wind. Now, another thing is, because this is wool, because this is hair, right, it sticks to itself. And so there's going to be some cases where I will have to stop and guide it along because it won't want to do that. And that's not a big deal, really. So one of the cool things about this hook is you can go ahead and attach the yarn to the hook, and it stops it from pulling what you've already spun down here off. Okay, so, and I always like to leave like about 2 inches, do a little overlap. And a lot of times I find I like to start the spin here. Just give it a little twist. And this is an S twist, which means if I apply this yarn, I have to spin it in the opposite direction, otherwise I will undo the yarn. So put some spin in it. Notice that it spins. I let it hang off to the side, and then I'm going to let that spin travel up the fiber. And voila, you're making yarn. And I'm holding on to it because I've still got some even spaces. And I tend to like to draft out a fairly long strand. So there's my fingers right here at the top, and there's a spindle right down there. That's a good amount. And then every so often you'll stop and you will wind it on. And because I know this is going to be a lot, I'm trying to wind most of it at the bottom of the cup. And then I'll move up. But as you can see, the strand changes. It's a little thinner up here, a little thicker down there. That's fine. I'm not too worried about it. But I don't want to go all the way to where it's unspun, right? So I like to go a little farther up than that. And the purpose of the wrapping, again, is to keep it from trying to pull what's already wound off of here. Let's see. Here we go. You can see some of it has come off, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. But that's exactly the purpose of wrapping it multiple times. That to catch there. And as you can see, this is time consuming. This is not something for the faint of heart, not somebody who wants an immediate return. Like, this is going to take some time. I've got 100 grams, or about 3.5 ounces of roving to spin. Last time it took me several hours for a couple of days to do it. I kept thinking, oh my God, how is there more to spin? Why is there so much? And I know this is going to be a problem, so I'm going to make sure that that is down there. It came loose a little bit. That's okay. And the cool thing about this is because this is all hand done, you know, if you do start to make a mistake or notice something is wonky, you know, it's not like a machine moving where it's going to be a lot harder to stop it. You want to let it, the spindle leans off to the side a little bit. It puts some tension on the yarn. So it helps it holds its spin a little better. And another interesting thing about this yarn is when I drafted it, I've just been drafting it every which way, which means while the yarn itself, the roving itself had a dye pattern to it, this yarn, based on how I'm spinning it, will not have the same dye pattern. Sometimes I'm pulling from one end, sometimes I'm pulling from the other end. Sometimes the strand breaks off in the middle and I don't restart it where the color join was. And that just for me means that I get a much more interesting yarn. Ooh. tell you this is going to be a lot more interesting as this cup gets fuller and fuller, because it is going to add weight to the spindle. And I noticed that as the cup got fuller and fuller with the last one, it took a little more finesse to spin. So probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and finish what's on the distaff, and then I'm going to cut this video off. I do have to leave at 2:15 my time, so I've got like another 35 minutes. Okay. And this spin, because it's only being spun this one original time, is called a single. And that refers to the ply. It's not been plied, so it is a single ply, which means there is technically no ply. It's just the initial spinning that has occurred. Nice. Phone is making noises. Weird. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm putting a lot of spin and then letting that spin travel up the thread. Okay. And there's going to be little weird spots, and I'm going to leave that. That's fine. It's character. There are lots of different kind of ways to spin. You can add curls, things called beehives, and a lot of thick and thins or art spun yarns have those elements in them. So it's not a nice, even, smooth strand, and it's not meant to be. Sometimes I get a little help. I know it maybe needs a little more spin in a different part of it. And this is just the way I do it. The basic processes, no matter who you are, the same. You're applying twist to a fiber, and then you set it, which basically is like blocking the yarn. It's essentially what you're doing. Just get everything even and stretch out some of the kinks and some of the places where it's spun a lot tighter than other places. Okay, so pull too hard. So this piece right here, I know that I pulled it a lot, so that's going to be a thinner spot. Here's a thicker spot that I don't want to stick. And so I'm holding the spindle so that it doesn't unravel, but it doesn't try to put the spin this far up. And because I know this is thinner, I'm going to be a little gentler with it until I get it secured. And as you can see, there's a very wide difference between this right here and this down there. Like I said, there is a style that wherein that is what is meant to be done. I was aiming for an even yarn. I'm not going to say I did a good job, but that's okay. So, and both of these skeins are mine, so I'm not selling them. I am going to be working towards adding yarn in the future. It is likely going to be extremely small batch, so it is unlikely that you will find any sweater quantity. You might find enough for a small to medium shawl, but that is about it. And that's deliberate because this is so time intensive. And I have other art forms that I practice. I want them to have time as well. Okay. And we're getting to the end of the distaff. And the way I'm drafting and the way I'm drawing out the fiber where I'm making a really long spun piece has consequences. It is hard on my shoulder. So that is why I typically don't spin for a very long time. Incidentally, I have a shoulder injury and it's on my left side, which is inconvenient. All right. We're about done. Put a little more twist. And because this is merino and silk, this yarn is going to be a little hairy. Also, some of that is accounted for by the specific spinning style. Those tend to make a hairier yarn because technically the fiber is just going all over the place. And that's why it's hairy. And I'm going to go ahead and draft a little more here. Here. Because this is off of here, I'm going to go ahead and set that down. I don't need that anymore. And like I said, I'm not going to spin this all the way to the end. I like to leave about 1.5 to 2 inches left over. And what that does is lets me have something to join. So I'll wind this on. And then so that is a little thicker than I am, a little less spun than I want it to be. So let's see. Turn off my timer. So there we go. It's about twice as much as it was-ish. I want to say I did a couple of the same length yesterday, and so it's not exactly double, but it took about the same amount of time. So we're at roughly about an hour of spinning, and that's what we've got to show for it. I've still got this little piece that I pulled off. This is a nice chunk that has to be separated. Let's see, another piece similar to this one, and then the big hunk that you saw earlier. So I hope you enjoyed this little video of me spinning and my random chatter. Like I said, this yarn's looking really interesting. You can see there's not actually a real pattern to what the colors look like, and that has everything to do with how I drafted it and the order in which I took the pieces and added them on there. But I think it's going to make for a lot more interesting a yarn doing it that way. You know, variegateds that are planned and whatnot can certainly be really pretty, and then there's things like pooling which can be done and stuff like that, but this will give it even more character because it's not uniform in any way at all other than having the same basic colors. So if you like videos like this, make sure that you head over to my Patreon. As soon as this video is done being processed, I'm going to put a link in the description. You'll be able to follow that link and go and see the show notes. You can comment, and if you dig what I'm doing and want to know more about the kinds of things I'm doing and all of my work, you can become a patron. Your patronage allows me to keep doing this, keep making art, and to work in a way that I'm able to do so easily and consistently. And that matters a lot. So there you go. Toodles, and have a happy Thursday.